So we're going through this series through the book of Romans. We're calling it Best News Ever. Say Best News Ever. Right? And we're in the last third of the book. And I want to start driving this concept home that the best news ever, we can't share it if we don't know three things. If we don't know the good news, if we don't know the bad news, and we can't share the best news ever. And so I want to do a quick review of what we've been going through in the first 11 chapters, because the first 11 chapters, the best news ever, is what causes us to eventually share the best news ever and live the best life ever. So here we go. Do you remember the good news, right? Do you remember the good news? What is the good news? Somebody shout it out. Excellent. God made everything, so life is all about Him. Now, the second part of the good news is what? All right, so we're going to arrange this. So it's good, right, and loving. So we're going from the shortest word to the longest word. Good, right, and loving, because it reflects Him. Because God is what? He's good, He's righteous, He's loving, and when He makes something, it reflects Him. Now, the bad news. What's the bad news? What do? We rejected God and made life all about? Made it all about ourselves, right? And so, what's going on my computer? It's not. Well, we made it. Yeah. The monitor's rejecting me. All right, we made it so our rejection then separates us from God. Let me see what's going on here really quick. Is it back? There we go. All right, I fixed it myself. All right. Our rejection separates us from God, His love, and His life. All right, and then life without God is what? It's sinful, it's selfish, and it's broken because it reflects us now and not God. All right, so try to grab these thoughts because I want you to be able to share this with people. These are the foundational truths that we discovered about life from the book of Romans. Now, the best news ever is that God is merciful. Say merciful. Yes, He is. That's the best news, is that God is merciful and He is unwilling for us to suffer eternal separation from Him. So He sent His Son Jesus to save us and bring us back to Him. Good. All right, and then the hard one that's going to take some practice, you're going to have to intentionally work on this one, right? Jesus became one of us and lived a perfect life on behalf of us, was condemned, excellent, because of us, died in place of us, right? So it follows the logical sequence. And then He defeated death for us, and now He offers new life freely to us. Excellent, all right? And so God's mercy should inspire us to believe His love, receive His grace, and call on Him to be saved. That's why we want to share about God's mercy, because that's what's going to inspire your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers to actually call on Him to be saved. And it also, as we're now getting into the last third of the book, it inspires us to worship Him by presenting ourselves as a living sacrifice. Remember, what was the bad news? What do? We rejected God and made life all about us, ourselves. So now what do we need to sacrifice? Ourselves, and get back to making God the center of our lives, which is what worship is. And that's what Paul's now practically getting to. How do we practically begin to worship God? It's by not being conformed by or pressured to conform to the world, but being inwardly transformed by the renewing of our mind. So here's the idea. God wants to blow your mind and revolutionize your life. Turn to someone and say, God wants to blow your mind. All right, turn to somebody else and say, God wants to revolutionize your life. All right, so this is what it's all about. And now let's jump into Romans 13 and look at this together. Let's read this together. It says, let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists authorities resists what God has appointed. Those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's servant, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the evildoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. All right, for those that are coming on Wednesday night, we got a great group on Wednesday night, learning how to study the Bible inductively. Here's a little bone to you. This is what it looks like, right? There's a lot going on. All right, there's a lot of causations. There's a lot of substantiations. Paul's making a lot of big ideas here that he knows are hard to swallow, so he's giving us a lot of reasons why we should believe it. That's what all the fors and becauses are there for. All right, so he's going to tell us to do some things. Here's what it looks like if you were to kind of break it up structurally, right? The first idea, the big idea is let every person be subject to governing authorities. And then he gives us the reason why. For there's no authority except from God. Now, those two ideas together become a cause, right? So it's therefore, whoever resists authority resists what God has appointed, because there's no authority except from what God appoints, right? And then he follows this up, for rulers are a terror to bad conduct. And he asks the question, you want to be unafraid, right? Anybody want to be unafraid when you drive down the freeway and the highway patrol pulls up behind you? Right? What should you do if you want to be unafraid of the highway patrol? Do what's good, right? Drive the speed limit. If you're going 90 miles an hour and your light in your car gets washed in blue and red lights, it's not Christmas time. It's fine time, right? It's penalty time, and you are now afraid, right? Your adrenaline starts pumping, fear grips you because you know I'm doing what's wrong and the authorities have caught me. Contrast, but if you do wrong, be afraid, right? Be looking in your rear view mirror. Be panicked when you see a black and white sitting on the side of the road. For rulers are God's servants to enforce justice. That becomes another big idea, that whole thing that gives us our last causation. Therefore, one must be in subjection. And so he comes back to this idea of being subject to governing authorities, and he says, because For because of this, which is another way of saying, therefore you pay taxes, right? Authorities are ministers of God attending to this very thing. So pay to all what they are due, taxes and revenue, respect and honor. So that's kind of the big flow of the thoughts here in this paragraph. What's the big idea? What's the big idea here? Remember, we started off in Romans 12 with this idea of we worship God by sacrificing our self-interest, presenting ourselves practically as living sacrifices. So here's the big idea. We worship God practically by worship God practically. How do you worship God practically? By being subject to the government. Now, I know for some of you, it's like, right? This is like, wait, what? I thought being resistant to the government is what's God honoring. Standing up for my God-given rights, that's what's God honoring. And this is like for you, just being subject to the government is a form of worship? I don't get that. So Paul's going to break it down for us. And I want to give you a little context. All right? So remember, to whom is Paul writing this letter? To believers in Rome. What's significant about Rome? What's it the capital of? The Roman Empire. You know who just happens to be the emperor when Paul writes this? Nero is the emperor at the time of Paul's writing. What do we know about Nero? He's one of the most brutal emperors ever. His reign was characterized by complete religious intolerance and suppression. He enforced the imperial cult, which required citizens to worship him as God. He blamed the great fire of Rome on Christians, and as a result, he had them executed by crucifixion, being torn apart by wild animals, and burning them alive. Reportedly, he even had a big party once, and it was an evening party, and he lit it with a courtyard around his palace with burning Christians. Put them on big poles, poured pitch on them, and lit them on fire and used them for lighting. This is the context that Paul's writing this. Okay? So I just want you to keep that in mind as we dig into the content of what he is giving us. So how do we worship God? Paul says, let every person be subject to the governing authorities. Now, I want to just throw this out there. This is my heart for you, is for you to think biblically, to adopt an approach to life, a worldview that is God-honoring. I love being an American, but I love being a Christian more. And my hope for you is that as we go through the book of Romans, you would be more Christian in your thinking than American in your thinking. Okay? Because that's what gets you into heaven. That's what gets you into eternity. There is no free pass for Americans in heaven. You don't get to be in heaven for eternity. You're not saved from your sins because you've got a blue passport with an eagle on it. All right? It doesn't work like that. And so and also, Paul is giving a very general and broad teaching. He is not going into every conceivable exception that's possible when it comes to a teaching on government. He is giving us broad principles, universal, general principles. So say this is general. Say, I don't expect this to cover everything. Okay, so don't get hijacked in thinking, well, what about when? right? Or what about this? Or what about Hitler? We're not looking at every specific instance of government. We're looking at government in general. And I think sometimes we get off track because we never learn and embrace the underlying foundational principles, and we live our life only thinking about exceptions. And so I really want us to embrace the general principles here as we think about and wrestle with Paul's teaching on government. All right, so let's dig into the specifics. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities. What does he mean by that? Well, what does he mean by every person? Well, the word every here means everyone considered individually. That's important because it's not just a collective, it's every single individual. That's the word that Paul uses here. Person means soul or life. The word subject means to place oneself under something in an orderly fashion. All right, anybody that's in the military, you understand how this works. When they call you out of the barracks, you got to line up in an orderly fashion. People don't have their own preferences in the military. Anybody been in the military? Right? You don't get to line up how you want to line up. You don't get to go out when you want to go out. You don't get to dress the way you want to dress. Freedom of expression does not exist in the military. You have to line up to subject yourself to the authority in an orderly fashion. That's the idea that Paul's putting out here. Okay? Now, to the governing authority. What does he mean by governing authority? All right, so the word governing here means someone that's elevated in rank, character, or status. Someone that's elevated in rank, character, or status. The word authority is the Greek word exousia. Say exousia. This is important because it's a key word, and it means the right or power to do something. The right or power to do something. So here Paul is saying there's two kind of important implications for us here. The first one is that this is a universal principle because he said every soul, not every believer, not every person that agrees that you agree with. This is every person at every time and in every place. There's no way, Paul has no ability to make a broader statement than he just made, to make a more inclusive statement than he just made. He's applying it to whom? So turn to someone and say, this applies to you. All right, this applies to you. All right. And it involves a personal responsibility. Each individual person is responsible for placing themselves under whatever government authority exists for them. This is going to be challenging, tough, because we live in under one of the most participatory, inclusive, right-imparting governments in the history of the world. I'm not sure Paul could have conceived of a government as permissive and inclusive and inviting to participate as ours. And it's tempting to conflate American ideology with biblical theology. And that's what I want to be really careful of today, is that we don't take our unique, very privileged position in terms of the government that we are living under and apply that to every person at every time and in every place. I had a very rude awakening when I went to Russia as a missionary. We were there in the early 90s under communism, and We were out street preaching one day, and it happened to be election day, and I didn't know they had laws against preaching at election day. And I found a voting center where there were lots of people gathered, and I'm like, what a great opportunity to tell everybody they should vote for Jesus. And the police showed up about 5 minutes into my message and put me in a car, and I'm like, hey, I'm an American. You can't do this. I've got rights. And the guy looked at me and was like, no, you don't. You're in Russia, right? And I'm like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble, right? So what I thought were my God-given rights became very clear. No, they were government-given rights. And I was not in the same government that I had grown up under, and I no longer had those rights. So we got to be careful not to project onto every person in every place at every time the same freedoms and privileges that we have. The American ideology is not a universal principle about government. Paul is giving us God's universal, righteous, holy, perfect understanding of how he wants us to look at government. Okay, so this is going to trump everything that we think in terms of American ideology. So, and we're to do it willingly and in order. Now, what thinking needs to be renewed in order to embrace this? Because remember, we're talking about not being conformed to our culture, but being transformed by the renewing of our minds. So Paul's going to give us a bunch of ideas that need renewing. And so here's the first idea that we need to renew. There is no authority except from God. And he instituted all the authorities that have ever existed. And so this needs to be renewed in our thinking. Let's break this down a little bit. All right, there's no authority except from God. What that means is that God's authority is absolute. All right, we've already talked about he's all-powerful. No one has any power beyond what God allows. He created everything for his purposes. And so he has both the right and the power to do whatever he wants. Remember, that was the definition of authority. The right and power to do something. God has the absolute right and all the power to do whatever he wants. There is no one that can say no to God. There is no one that can hinder God. There is no one who can oppose God. There is no one who can slow God down. There is no one who can get in God's way. He has all the power. His authority is absolute. All other authority, therefore, is delegated from God. That makes sense? Right? If he has it all and you have some, where'd you get it? You got it from God, right? So how many dads in the room? Where'd you get that authority? From God, not from childbirth. God gave you the authority that you have as a father. Any bosses in the room? Where'd you get that authority? From God. Right? And it goes on, right? Any teachers in the room, when you walk into a classroom, what do you exercise? Hopefully, some authority, right? It's not absolute chaos in your classroom. Where'd you get that? From God, because all of it is his. And any authority that we have has been delegated to us by God. And I want to show you this from Jesus' perspective when he's on trial for his life, being tried by a corrupt, capricious, willful, selfish, insecure political leader named Pilate. And Pilate's asking him questions. Jesus just kind of looking at him. And Pilate said to him, "Will you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the authority, the exousia, to release you, and I have the authority, the exousia, to crucify you. And look what Jesus says to him. You would have no exousia over me unless it had been given to you from above. What is Jesus recognizing, acknowledging, and submitting himself to? Jesus is acknowledging Pilate's God-given authority, and he subjects himself to it. Wow. Do you see that? Even Jesus acknowledges that Pilate was given this authority from above. And he subjected himself to it. And he even says in one of the other Gospels, you know, if I wanted to, I could call my servants and they would obliterate you. But I'm going to respect the God-given authority that my Father has given you. And I'm going to subject myself to your bogus, wrong, unlawful even treatment of me that's going to cost me my life. I wonder how Jesus would have responded to the pandemic. Just saying. Let's go on. He goes on to say that God instituted all existing authorities. Instituted is this word tasso, and it means to assign or place in a certain order. I want you to remember that word tasso because it's going to come up again. And it's going to come up in reference to us. Right? So tasso is God's activity of placing authority in a certain order. Right? God is not a God of disorder, but one of peace. And so the idea here is that he sets authority structures in place to create order and peace. It makes sense? God is not a God of chaos. He is not interested in anarchy or chaos in society. And so he assigns authority to people like parents. Because what would happen if God gave parents no authority? I mean, sometimes it feels like that, right? Anybody ever lose an argument to a 2-year-old? I'm not sure how that happens. I'm like, I have a graduate degree and I'm losing, right? What's going on? But ultimately, God has given us authority because what does he want in the family? Order, peace. God gives authority in the workplace. Why? What does he want there? Order and peace. God gives authority in society and civil government. Why? Because he wants order and peace. All civil order is a testimony of God's sovereignty. You ever thought about that? The fact that society is ordered, anytime there is order in society, it is a testimony that God is sovereign because he gave that authority for the purpose of establishing that order. Whether it's family, society, spiritual, or governmental authority, it's all a testimony of God's authority. And I think this is why the devil is so hell-bent on disrupting order in our society. Why he is tearing down the authority in family structures. Why he is encouraging anarchy. Because it tears down the testimony of God's sovereignty. Paul goes on and says government authorities are actually God's servants. Now remember, this is a general principle. Just because in general they serve God's purposes doesn't mean that every action on their part is endorsed by God. I want to make that clear. They're God's servants, but not every action on their part is endorsed by him. They can be disobedient to his intention. Now, servant here is diakonos. It's the same word used for ministers in the church. It's the same word. Government officials, God sees them like pastors. He sees them as ministers. They're there to serve him and his purposes. In what way does Paul say they are God's servant? He gives us three things that are important to understand. First, it's to impose a general fear of doing what's wrong. And he says they aren't given the sword in vain. They're there to impose a general sense among society that if you do something wrong, you're going to get punished. That's part of one of the ways that they serve God. And even bad leaders, ungodly leaders, serve God in this way. They create a general fear of doing what's wrong. The second thing they do is they promote general welfare by rewarding what is good. They incentivize good behavior. Now we see that in the beginning of verse 4. And then the third thing they do is they enforce justice by punishing wrongdoers. They actually carry out God's wrath. Now, let's start putting all this together. Jesus was given all authority when he rose from the dead. Matthew 28, Jesus said to them, "All authority, exousia, has been given to me in heaven and on earth." Jesus has all authority. He's sovereign over every form of authority on the planet. Jesus is our king, and our allegiance needs to be to him first and foremost. What kingdom are you most aligned with? What do you think about that? What kingdom are you most aligned with? What founding documents most shape your view of authority in government? Here's the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. Beloved document, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. This is the heart of the American ethos, right? We love this. How many of you love this passage? I mean, I've quoted it. I love it. It resonates. It's like, yes, I think there's almost no secular statement that's more uplifting. And it's affirmation of humanity. But it's biblically inaccurate. It's theologically wrong. That doesn't mean it's not a great document to base a secular government on, but I just want you to realize that it's in conflict with what Paul's told us here in Romans 13. He said that government is instituted by God, not men. But what did our founding fathers think? Look at what it says. Governments are instituted among men. And where do they get their power from? The consent of the governed, not God. Now, I'm not saying you should abandon the Declaration of Independence, but I'm saying you should question what's really shaping my understanding of authority, government, and civic duty. These thoughts reflect the secular deism of Thomas Jefferson, not biblical doctrine of Paul the Apostle. I know I just offended a bunch of people, but again, my heart is that you would think biblically, that your worldview would be biblical. That as you wrestle with this idea, as you'd value being a child of God over being a citizen of the USA. Not that, I mean, I've been a part of a lot. I actually have 3 nationalities. Do you guys know that? I have 3 passports. I need like a box with a gun and some cash and my 3 passports, and I'll look like a spy. But I have Italian citizenship from my marriage to Nanette. I have American citizenship from birth, and I have Haitian citizenship from my dad's citizenship in Haiti because he was a Haitian citizen. Right? And so I love the idea of I'm proud to be an American citizen, but my identity, my eternal identity, is my citizenship in heaven. And my ultimate allegiance is to that first and foremost. All right, so what behavior needs to be transformed? It's this big idea of being in subjection. And Paul gives us 3 things. He says, don't resist authority, pay your taxes, and give respect and honor. And I just want to wrap up with these 3 things. He starts off with one must be in subjection, and he says, therefore. And so it's everything he's told us about government should cause us to be in subjection, right? Therefore, what comes before causes what follows. There's no authority except what God institutes. God set them in place to ensure order, curb wrongdoing, incentivize what is good, and enforce justice. Therefore, we must be. And this is a strong word in the Bible. It means forced by a sense of necessity. This is not a suggestion, and he's not just putting it out there as a command. He's saying this should be something internally that forces you. There should be such a deep sense of necessity based on what we understand about God and his authority and his sovereignty and what he's set up in place that we should be forced by necessity to be in subjection. Right? To place ourselves in order under that authority because what we've learned should force us to do that. And then he goes on and says, now don't resist authority. And this one's going to be hard to swallow. But he says, whoever resists, and the word here is antitasso. Remember what tasso was? It said, remember that word? That's what God does when he sets things in order. To resist government authority is to be anti-tasso. It's to actually be against God's action of setting things in order. You're actually going against what God has set up when you are resisting government authority. We're resisting what God has appointed. And the word appoint here is from 2 Greek words, dia, which means through, and tage, which means anything arranged in an orderly, methodical fashion. So here's the big idea that government isn't arbitrary, but thought out with orderliness and methodicalness by God. God actually has a plan. So pay your taxes. Pay to all what is owed. The word pay here means to make repayment. A lot of times we talk about, I'm not going to give the government any more money. Well, God doesn't see it that way. He sees it as you returning something. He doesn't see it as you giving something. And he says what's owed, that's an indebted obligation. So our debt is based not on what authorities have done or do. And this is something that I've heard a lot of recently, that our government doesn't deserve my taxes. Well, guess what? Your taxes aren't owed them because they've done something to deserve it. Our debt is based on the order that God established. Just like parents aren't owed respect and honor because of how good of a parent they've been. They are owed that honor and respect because of the order that God has established in the family. We have a debt that we need to repay to authorities. How many of you drove here on relatively smooth roads? All right. How many of you bought gas at a gas station in the last month? How many of you took a shower in the last week and had clean water coming out of your pipes? Who's doing all that for you? The government. We have a debt to repay to our government, to the authorities that manage these things. Think about your trash. Imagine if you had, how much trash do you accumulate in the course of a week? We have like this massive gray trash can. And somehow we manage to fill it every single week with stinking, rotting food and, stuff we just don't want anymore. And if you've got kids, you've got like toxic waste going in there, and right? And who takes care of that for you? The government does. They don't complain about it. Right? And so there's this obligation that we have to pay our taxes. And the word taxes means the burden that's carried. As a member of society, we carry a burden to contribute to it. And that's the word for taxes. The word revenue here means the end or the last part. So Paul chooses two words that are like the beginning of the taxes and the very end of the taxes, right? So as far as the government wants to tax you, guess what? They get to tax you. And here's the big idea that Jesus, I'll wrap it up kind of with this thought. In Mark 12, Jesus said, it was asked, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Should we pay or shall we not pay? But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, bring me a denarius so I may see it. And they brought it to him, and he says, whose image and inscription is on it? And they said, Caesar's. And Jesus said, give to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and give to God the things that are God. This is Jesus is making a direct reference to Genesis 1:27. And he's talking to Pharisees, he's talking to clergy. They would have caught this reference, this image and likeness reference, where God says he made man in his own image. And what is Jesus showing us? What's he teaching us? This is critical. What can the government take from you? What can they demand from you? Anything that has its image on it. What can the government take from you? What are we all living? What do we call it? The American dream, right? All of our prosperity has America stamped all over it. All of our rights and privilege have America stamped all over it. Our entire lifestyle is American. Our clothes are American. Our comforts are American. I encourage you, go to Haiti, go to Bangladesh, go to just Tijuana, and you're going to see that you are stamped with American privilege. And just enjoy it. Thank God for it, but realize whose image it bears. And so, what can the government take from you? Can they take your money? Sure they can. Absolutely, they have that power. Can the government take your guns? Yes, they can. They gave you the right to have it. And if they want to change the Constitution, they can take that away. You do not have a biblical, God-given right to bear arms. That's an American right. And it's. And I know a lot of people are like, I'm out of it. This last time I'm coming to this church, right? If I'm coming with my guns, right? Right? Can they take your property? Absolutely they can. It's called eminent domain, right? Look at how our country was built. They took a lot of people's property to build this country of ours. They have that power. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying they're empowered. Can they take your freedom? Absolutely. You break the law, you see how fast they'll take your freedom. Go visit people in San Quentin and ask them if they still have their freedom or if the government took it. Can they take your time? They can take your time. right? I'm fortunately past the age of being drafted if there's some war, but there was a long season of my adult male life where if they wanted me and there was a need for it, what could they do? They just take me, right? You ask anybody that's serving in the military if their time's theirs. Not really, right? Talk to Douglas, right? What did he just get canceled? His Liberty, right? Just got canceled indefinitely because his aircraft carrier needs to stay out wherever it is. The government has the power to do these things. What does the government not have the power to do? What can it not take from you? What is stamped with God's image? You are your soul. You were created in the image of God. They cannot take your soul or your worship. And that's where you see in the Bible these examples of civil disobedience. It's because they've been asked to worship something other than God, and they say no. They are told, you can't pray to your God, and they say no. You can't take my soul. You can't have my worship. Everything else, they kind of have the power to take a lot of it. Right? Now, we live in a very right-driven society, but I want you to realize the rest of the world doesn't think like you. China doesn't think like you. People in Africa don't think like you. Very few places think like this. We want to think biblically. And what does the Bible say? We need to give respect to whom it's owed, honor to whom it's owed. I know we've gone a little long, so I'll just wrap up with this thought. One of the things I think we are most remiss in is this idea of giving respect and honor. And I think as Christians, God's calling us to something higher, to something different. We're heading into 3-4 months of very contentious political season. And I want to call you, I want to invite you to something more respectful and more honorable. Because God says, give respect and honor to whom it's due. Who is respect and honor due to? Who should be getting that? Let me jump ahead here really quick. God is owed respect and honor. Parents are owed respect and honor. Those who are older are owed respect and honor. Do you realize this is one of my favorite ones now that I have gray hair? Somebody asked me, right? I had a hairstylist about a couple years ago said, hey, do you want us to do something about all that gray? Right? Because we can do they have like what they call it a camouflage thing where over a few weeks they kind of blend me back to looking like I'm still 56, but with a crisis of conscience or something, But look what the Bible says. You shall rise before the gray-headed. I'm like, why would I give that up? I don't want people to rise when I walk in the room. We don't do that much anymore, but this is what it says. And look what it says. Honor the presence of an older man. Fear your God. I am the Lord. Why do we respect the elderly? Because we fear God, and He said to. It's not because of what they've done. It's not because of what they have to offer. It's not how much they can bench anymore. It's not how much they can remember. It's not how sharp they are or what they can contribute. We honor them because they're due it from God. Never speak harshly to an older man, but appeal to him respectfully as you would your own father. Elders in the church are owed respect and honor. Paul said that in Timothy. The elders who direct the affairs of the church are worthy of double honor, especially those who work in preaching and teaching. And here's where I want to finish up today. Government leaders are owed respect and honor, not because of what they've done, but because of the authority that God has given them. We honor them. Look at what Paul told Titus. Remind them to be submissive to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, be ready for every good work, to speak evil of no one, to avoid quarreling, to be gentle, and to show perfect courtesy to all people. And we honor them by not speaking evil of them and by praying for them, whether we agree with them or not. One of the things that's grieved me recently is to see our president get mocked. He's worthy of honor on 2 counts. And I don't agree with a lot of what he does, but he's worthy of honor because he's been given the authority of President of the United States. What he does or not, he's worthy of respect and honor because God has given him that authority. That doesn't mean that everything he does is right and that he can do whatever he wants and face no consequences for it. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying he's worthy of honor and he's worthy of the respect and honor of an older man. We should not speak evil of him. It breaks my heart that he's getting mocked. It's not the way Christians should live. And my heart is that none of you would be participating in any of that kind of behavior. God's called us to something higher because we understand that he is the ultimate authority, and when we honor those that he's delegated authority to, we're honoring him. Amen? All right, and you can come talk to me and tell me all the things you disagree with. Let me pray for us so we can go have some lunch. Father, thank you for the challenge of your word, and I pray that the things that are from the scriptures that are rock solid biblical, everyone would remember and take to heart. Things that were tainted with my perspective or any bias I might have, Lord, I pray that people would forget about it and that we would live lives that honor and glorify you. May we be willing and eager to present ourselves as living sacrifices, not out of a sense of obligation, but a sense of adoration. May our hearts be to worship you by sacrificing ourselves so that we can bring you honor and glory. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.